The next session that we have for today is titled as The Hand of Destiny. It is a discussion about Srividya Srinivasan's latest novel, The Hand of Destiny. She is an author, poet, philosopher, filmmaker, traveler, and an entrepreneur. She runs Rastus Media, a creative strategy and a communication firm. She will be in conversation with Aparajit Dinesh, a founder and host of the IGTV platform, Project Z Pins Board. Over to you, Aparajit.
Hello to all of you here, and thank you so much for attending and joining us in the conversation to talk about this amazing book, The Hand of Destiny. This book, to give all of you a brief summary of what it entails, it starts with a tragedy, a terrorist attack, and of two boys, Jonas and Venkat, coincidentally on their birthdays. And it's all about how their family members have to go and retrieve their bodies, and they go through this amazing journey of self-discovery, compassion, forgiveness, and ultimately about how the two mothers end up meeting. And it's an incredibly complex moment because Jonas is assumedly the one who set the bomb off. And I'm not going to give too much away in case if there's any spoilers, but that's mainly what it's about. But it has so many more layers, which we'll delve into in the next half an hour together. So my first question was, The Hand of Destiny, what makes it so relevant in the times that we live in?
So a book like The Hand of Destiny is extremely relevant for the times that we live in, because we are all living in a very fragile world now. And there is a lot of question about what it is to be human. What is it to exist in today's time with its push and pull of identity crisis in terms of, say, urbanization, globalization, religion, politics, geopolitics, communities, gender, I mean, ultimately and of course, technology. And there is so much to being just human. At the top of it, you have things like the pandemic and the climate, so you have a lot of things that are pushing us on, pulling us in all kinds of directions. So ultimately, what is it to actually feel, breathe, think, operate, and understand who we are in the midst of all this? So pretty much The Hand of Destiny, in some sense, adds grace to that fragile vulnerability with which we all are trying to understand our place in the world today.
At the same time, the book is centered in 3 different countries. It's in the UK, India, and France, and it's around the subject of terrorism. What made you choose such a large canvas in terms of geography and such an intense theme for that as well?
Okay, that's an interesting question. And incidentally, this book started in 2013. It was a very small incident. I was reading about this young girl who was on a scooter, and she was wearing a burqa, and she was stopped by a policeman in France. It was a very random incident, nothing of any big importance. But for some reason, it made me feel that France, if it takes a very hard line towards certain communities, could have, there could be a lot of things that happen in that country. And incidentally, I started writing this in 2013, and 2015, we all know what happened in France. But more than anything, terrorism often is a mindless act, which often impacts a lot of people unconnected with it, a lot of innocent people. So it set me thinking as to if something like an act of terrorism happens, what are the backstories? I mean, who are these people who, through some random fate or destiny, as you call it, are brought to a particular point together, and it impacts them from there on forever, their families too. So a very large subject like terrorism, which links so many countries, communities, cultures, finally it rests on individuals. And it becomes a very personal tragedy, and it comes to personal questions of what do we do with this situation that we are grappling with. So that was the premise on which this book was constructed. And 3 countries feature in this, in fact, a lot more countries also do, but the main 3 countries that feature is India, because of course it's the comfort zone. And so there is an Indian family that we are talking about here. And we are also talking about an Irish family that has settled for many generations in the outskirts of London. And then the incident happens in France. And there are about 6 people who are actually impacted by that act of terrorism. 6 people die, and they come from many countries. So from a random incident of terrorism, it actually weaves its threads across to a lot more.
And I think with loss, the mothers who have to lose their children are probably arguably one of the most affected in terms of loss and grief. And the 2 mothers in the book, Raja Lakshmi and Catherine Mary Flanagan, what makes them so similar, but also at the same time makes them so different?
So while this book on the surface seems like the journey or central importance is given to the 2 mothers, it's a book a lot more than the journey of these 2 mothers. But to first talk about these 2 mothers themselves, Raja Lakshmi Meenakshi Sundaram is your very typical, middle class person that you're likely to meet. She's just going to be 60 soon, and her son is about to be married in a few months. So she had everything going for her. And she is very comfortable speaking in Tamil. She's just trying to learn English so that, she can talk with her son much better. So it's a very innocent situation in which we catch such a huge tragedy happening in that family. And if you look at the other family of Catherine Mary Flanagan, they are typical churchgoers. They have been in, they're Irish, but they've been living in outside of London for quite a few generations. And if you look at her personality, she's not actually that well off. That family has a lot of pride that it puts out, but it's not really, economically, they have their struggles. So she's again orthodox in her own way, in her belief systems. So there is a certain amount of similarity in the way that these 2 families, and both these women, their sons are born to them quite late into their marriage, after a lot of prayer and after a lot of wishing for the child to happen. But beyond that, one of the dramatic differences is that Raja Lakshmi Meenakshi Sundaram is a far more, I would say, self-assured mother. She's a very confident parent throughout. But if you look at, say, Catherine, she's a mother who's full of self-doubts about whether she's done it right, whether she could have done a little more. So she always feels like, she failed her child somewhere. So there are these similarities, there are these differences, but they also have something that connects them beautifully, and which is the love for poetry and books. Of course, Raja Lakshmi only knows to appreciate poetry or writing in her own language, which is Tamil. And Catherine, of course, does it more in English. But there's a lot that connects them too.
Both of them are such strong female characters, and what's so nice about the book is that it has so many other characters as well. So how are the other men dealt with in the story?
So, see, this book is it's a personal journey of, like he introduced the book to you. The book starts with a tragedy. 2 families get the news that their near and dear ones are no more. So it's and on the birthdays of both these boys, coincidentally, it's their birthday. So imagine getting the news that somebody has passed away on their very birthday. So the women find it a lot more easy to kind of grapple with their emotions. The men in the book, while they actually take a slightly secondary, I would say, stand in the book, they're equally important and integral to the book, because of both the men, at least in the ones in the older generation, that's the husbands of these 2 women, they are men who don't know how to vocalize what they feel. They do not know how to support their women. They don't know how to express their love for their children openly. They even don't have how to handle their own pain, or in a position like this to take charge. So there is a certain vulnerability of the male that is a very integral part of this book. And if you look at the next generation of characters, where Venkat, one of the key characters, and you have Jonas and you have Venkat's friend Adi, these are the next generation of men who are far more comfortable with their women, with their relationships, with handling tough situations in a different way. And then you have also the teenagers, which is the next generation. So you have a generation of men playing a very integral role in the story as much as the women do.
And funny, what about the families? Because in both these families, they have such a dysfunctional nature about them. Is that a social commentary to our times, is like to the present?
You could put it that way. We are tracing the journey of two families, and the core question comes as to what is ultimately a family, and do people under the same roof actually understand each other? Do they give and receive love at the right time? And do they even understand what it is to lose an individual? Because ultimately, what is loss? I mean, how do we mourn somebody's presence or absence? So if you look at a case like Venkat, I mean, Venkat is Rajalakshmi's son, the one who passes away on his 28th birthday. Now, Venkat is easy to love because he's somebody who has fans everywhere. He makes friends wherever he goes. He pulls people along on his adventures. He's very, very easy to like, very, very easy to love. And throughout, from the beginning, since his birth till his passing away, he's surrounded by love and understanding. And he's surrounded by the family structure that solidly stands by him. If you look at the story of Jonas, even though when he's very young, he's like, he's loved by the community. He's a darling of his, his small community and everything. And he's loved at the church where he sings. So Jonas starts out his journey by being the darling of everybody's existence. But somewhere there's a shift which happens, and he disconnects with his family. And till the end, he never receives, even beyond after his passing away, he does not receive the validation, the affection, or the support that he so richly deserves. So what is it about? And within the family also, each of them are grappling with a sense of guilt over this incident. What could I have done? What did I fail to do? Oh, I did not assure them enough when I had a chance. So there is so much within a family that one doesn't understand as important. You only understand it after you have lost it, or you come close to losing it. And if you look at also what we call as extended families, you have characters like Adi, who's Venkat's closest friend, who for his own marriage is unable to call his own parents, but Venkat's family stands up like almost representing his family. So we have, and Adi steps in to be another son to Rajalakshmi when Venkat passes away. So we have this notion of a family, which especially in today's context where, families become community, families are sometimes individuals, families are made of two people, families are some strangers who suddenly feel like, they get you. So in some sense, at the end of the book, you'll find that Catherine goes back feeling that she has a sister or she has an extended family in Rajalakshmi. So this notion of family, as we call it, the traditional notion of family, the dysfunctional nature of it, as we try to hold it close together, and the fact that when you let it go, you find new families that we can embrace, is the central notion of this book.
I want to speak about Jonas and Venkat. Interestingly, these two are probably the main characters, but they're killed off in the beginning. Like, how did you go about writing them and creating these characters when it starts off with their death?
So the book starts with the key two people dying right at the beginning. So when I was in the process of writing it, somebody said, if you already killed him, what is there to write? So there's a saying, right, that if you pull the thread, the whole universe comes with it. So it's something like that, because we don't directly know these two boys at all. We know them only through other people's views about them, other people's memories of them, other people's feelings about them, celebrating them, missing them, feeling guilty about them. But that's also pretty much who we are as human beings, isn't it? I mean, we are here, gone tomorrow, and what we are is but a memory in somebody's head. We are a feeling, we are placed in so many elements and memories, and we're a concept finally. So that's pretty much what is captured in the way these two boys are talked about. We know them so well, and yet directly they don't speak to us. They speak to us through the mirrors, which are all other people's impressions about them. That's who we are also finally.
Out of these two boys, I think Jonas is personally most intriguing to me because he's assumed to be guilty, but there is no actual evidence that that he's guilty. And sort of that misjudgment is that sort of how, is that a commentary to the next young generation or the next young generation that you wanted to bring about?
In a way, yes, because Jonas is just about 19, turning 20. And he is definitely representative of a certain generation that wants to rebel, that is probably was raised in a particular way, but wants to go way beyond what feels very restrictive. Also, it is about young people wanting to make their own choices in terms of career, in terms of sometimes in the absence of the right male models, because in Jonas' case, his father is not the correct person that he can look up to. So he desperately searches for somebody to replace that father figure. And he wants to seek it outside. And he feels that small town of Bluehampton is too restrictive for him. And even in terms of, say, religious choices, so he changes his religion. So you have somebody like Venkat at 28 who chooses to be an atheist, but coming from a very orthodox, say, Brahmin family. And you have a Jonas who comes from an Orthodox Catholic family, but wanting to turn towards Islam. So you have a different lens to Jonas. And there is also a lot of anger in Jonas in terms of, if you notice, he does not, there's a contradiction in his character. He's somebody who never harms anybody. He actually always saves other people. He harms himself sometimes, but he's not somebody who's actually ever harms anybody. So it's very unjust that people assume because he would have converted to a particular religion a year ago, that he just landed up at the wrong spot at the wrong moment and is assumed to be guilty. And he's put on trial on media, put on trial by everybody. Nobody gives him the benefit of doubt. And it is up to his family, mainly his mother. And in a way, Rajalakshmi's willingness to give him the benefit of doubt that actually does justice to him. So this is a character which you always feel very protective about because it deserves so much more and he doesn't get it.
You mentioned faith and religion, and these are such prominent themes in the book. And I think in times of tragedy or loss, I think all of us at some minimal level, we do question it. And there are various instances where the characters question their religion and their faith as well. So how much does religion and faith play a role in, say, your sense of self-identity?
Religion plays a very, very important role in how I think all of us perceive ourselves. Like either we are extremely religious or we actually go the opposite. And we say, I don't believe in any kind of a religion, but both are with respect to the central notion of a religion, either accepting it or rejecting it. And if you look across most of the religions, it's either about how good you are while you're living, whether you're being, you follow some rules, whether you are pious, whether you're so and so. So each of us grapple, and some people are ritualistic, some people, are more about custom, some people are more about belief, some people want to go all the way opposite and reject religion, some people change their religion. In this book, you see it all. You see somebody like Rajalakshmi's husband, who's Meenakshi Sundaram. Meenakshi Sundaram does rituals every single day, but deep within, he doesn't believe in any religion. So he envies his wife who will follow, fast for a long time, but will willingly give up that fast just for somebody she loves. And when they are traveling together to France, she can easily hold one of her gods and hold it close to her and feel comforted, and he can't. Though he does the puja, he doesn't feel that belief. He envies her for that ability to be able to have something to latch onto. But if you look at the other side, somebody like Father Francis, who's actually, because there's a whole question of faith, whether Jonas can be buried in the local cemetery. in New Hampton, because he has converted his religion, then should he be taken back into Christianity? So will the village be okay with it? And there is this big guilt in the Father Francis. See, Father Francis is known, the Flanagans, even before Jonas was born. He's known them for years. He's 80 years old. He's literally seen the prayers for Jonas to be born, to his baptism, to everything. He's seen this boy right through his journey at the church. He questions and says, did I do something to make this child go astray? Why did I fail in my role as somebody who is supposed to be preaching or leading an example? Where did I go wrong in the way I spoke about my religion that this child has gone astray? And you have somebody like Venkat who's thoroughly, an atheist. He is very convinced about rationality. He studies everything, but he completely outright rejects it. And of course, you also have the 6 people who, all the 6 people, apart from these 2, there are 4 other people who die at the terrorist attack. So you have different people from different faiths who meet an end at a common point in time, just by the hand of destiny. Now, we sometimes, we spend an entire lifetime praying because we want a particular ending to our lives in a particular way, which honors what we have followed. But our ending is not given to us. So this book, in some sense, questions the very notion of what is it that we believe in, and is that belief for what we call now during our life? Is it like afterlife? What is it that we are talking about when it comes to faith? And even when somebody dies, would they know what we are doing as rituals? Does it even matter to them? Or is it for us who are living because we want to feel comforted by our communities or our sense of duty to them? Ultimately, what is faith? So that's what this book also questions throughout, through the various characters.
After reading the book and you see these themes of terrorism and it starts with death, you expect it to be extremely heavy, and it is in some parts, but there are also these little moments where just tug at your heart, and it doesn't have a heavy climatic ending that you would expect when you start. So what exactly are the emotions that you want to leave your reader with after reading the book?
See, with a subject like that, since this book starts with 2 people dying, and there are portions, of course, like anybody else. See, this book is not meant to be a typical book. It's a very personal read. When you read it, you're going to travel along. Even the style that I have chosen, you won't have very many dialogues. It's a lot more like monologues in the head. These are people who are grappling with an impossible situation, and each of them are having the stories running in their head about the situation. So, and death is very personal, mourning is very personal, healing is very personal, and finally hoping again and coming back to terms with life around us is very personal. So even when I was writing this book, it took a long time to write, not because I had a typical writer's block or anything like that, because a subject like that, you cannot write when you're feeling very low yourself or when you're feeling very heavy, because then the book becomes extremely heavy to put out and as well as to read. You also can't be writing a book like this when you're feeling very light and flippant, because it's not a subject that you laugh at. This book is not about black humor. It's a very deeply personal read. It's very sincere in its journey. These characters have their own weaknesses, plus points, their own charm where you fall in love with each of them. And all of them have an equal valid space in the book. So ultimately, the way we all traverse life, we think we remember a lot. But when we look back, what we remember is actually snapshots of our life. We remember life in certain points, dramatic, good, bad, ugly. It's almost like somebody took a picture postcard and put it in our heads. That's how we actually relive life, understand life, pinpoint it. Even if we didn't have photographs in our head, that's what we carry. So and see, it's like this, right? When you go on holiday, somewhere we feel that time stands still. It's because those little things that suddenly the sunlight coming through some trees, suddenly some bird flying somewhere, some random things suddenly make us feel like it's slower. It's just held a little longer. That's what makes a holiday very different from anything else that we do every day. That sense of being able to pinpoint certain things where it stays. This book is full of that because that's what we are all about. two old people holding hands in an airport. I mean, we don't even, and that's the second time in their marriage that they're holding hands after a period of nearly so many years. We don't know that story, right? Because all we see is two old people in an airport and we say, oh, how beautiful, how smart, and how cute. We don't know anybody's backstory. We don't know any moments. And throughout, you would see these little moments that actually add a lot of charm. The good parts, the bad parts, the parts where it tugs at you. So that's definitely, and interestingly, we had quite a lot of reader responses, and you would think that a book like this, which has moments which, like you said, tugs at somebody's heart, would be something that only women relate to. And you'll be very surprised that a lot of portions of the book where you thought women relate to, men actually responded extremely emotionally. And a lot of things where you assumed that men would probably relate to, we found women stepping up a lot and saying, I feel for this character, or I love this moment. So in that sense, this is a very human book. It really goes a little past gender.
Thank you all again so much for attending. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Srividya.
Thank you so much.